Professor Anthoni Van Nieuwkerk is a professor of security studies at the Wits School of Governance. Professor, good afternoon to you, and thank you for your time. I mean, Angela Merkel presided over what looks like to us a long period of calm in Germany. There was a bit of fraying at the edges towards the end. But this election seems to show that underneath Merkel, the politics of Germany was perhaps changing.
Yeah, no, indeed, Stephen. Thanks for the opportunity. It's good to reflect on the fortunes of the Germans because it's the strongest economy in Europe. It's one of our strongest trading partners. It plays an increasingly important role on the international stage. And I think why this is so important, the election outcome, is that Angela Merkel was a little bit like our Nelson Mandela. Whoever follows as the president or the leader of the country has big shoes to fill. And indeed, it's a world that's getting increasingly intolerant and dangerous. And the other important point I think that made the election so interesting is a lot of Germans are aging, but there's also a whole new generation of youngsters who went to vote who never knew anybody else but Angela Merkel, and they wanted to make their mark. And some of the election results intriguingly shows that they have an appetite for change. Although many people say Germans are very conservative, they prefer stability and so on, I think it's all true. But there's indeed the murmurings of change in the air going forward.
I mean, Germany's also played, and I would say Angela Merkel's played a pivotal role, a major role in managing that relationship between the West. So I really mean Europe, the EU, the United States, and Russia. Now, that balance of power, if she leaves the stage, I mean, is that going to be upset a little bit?
Yeah. One of her abilities, and she had remarkable abilities, was to be a pragmatic manager and somebody who was able to bring people together, and she did that with the rest of the Europeans and the Americans, and those that they perceived to be enemies. What a remarkable personality trait to do that, to play that role as a mediator. She did that particularly with Putin. And if it wasn't for her, I think Ukraine would have turned out much worse. And the ability of Putin, who's a really tough negotiator, to ride roughshod over European politics would have been much more in the limelight if it wasn't for her very calm demeanor, quiet style of politics, mediating behind the scenes. And she did that for a very particular reason. Germany and Russia are intertwined economically. They depend on each other. And remember, Germany is the strongest economy in Europe. So the economic and trade relationship between mighty, resurgent, Putin-driven, authoritarian Russia and the rest of Europe depended on her ability to make sure that this relationship doesn't break down too easily. And by the way, one of the iconic photographs I remember was her staring down Donald Trump at one of these NATO meetings where Donald Trump came in and said, "You guys are not paying enough for membership of NATO. Why must we keep your region safe?" Of course, he was right, but he was such a aggressive bully in saying that. She stared him down and resolved the situation quietly behind the scenes. I doubt very much whether Olaf Scholz has this ability. He's not young. He's experienced. He knows how politics and governments work. But that in terms of personality, whether he would be able to repeat what she has done, which means a vacuum is now being created that will be difficult to fill. And by the way, it's not only Russia that I think is receiving a lot of attention from the Americans and the Europeans, this NATO alliance. It's also the rise of China that's going to determine fancy footwork from the new German chancellor.
For us in Africa, I mean, Germany's not a major diplomatic player in southern Africa. There's a very messy and difficult history, of course, because of what happened in Namibia. It does have a lot of business interests, though, and it's sort of quite active. I mean, the previous German ambassador, there's a relatively new German ambassador here now, but the previous German ambassador was quite sort of busy, quite active. We think of the firms that employ people, Mercedes-Benz, BMW. These are big industrial players. I mean, Germany is sort of, from a business and economic point of view, quite interested in us, and we should be quite interested in them.
We should maintain this relationship. The EU is our biggest trading partner as a bloc. China is bigger as an individual country, but Germany really stands out. Long trade and economic and business relationships, which I think is important. So, of course, there's the colonial aspect. If you discount that for the moment, then we ought to recognize that Germany plays an important role in the affairs of Africa. It has helped set up, some of the management systems at the level of the African Union. And it was very supportive of us creating a peace and security architecture. The Germans, through their development agency, GIZ, really played an important role and continues to do so. And I think it is our relationship is of strategic value and importance.
Do you think that they see us in sort of South Africa as that important? And I say that because they don't really have very long historical ties to us. I mean, there are very few people who speak German in South Africa, for an example. There are some. There's not a big German diaspora here. There's not really a very big Southern African diaspora in Germany, I don't think.
Yeah, it's true. We like their beer. We like their... Our ruling elites like their cars, and maybe Newzroom Afrika too. I don't know what car you drive, but I mean, there's no disputing the fact that the Germans export quality products to us, and for us, it's an important market. It might be that this relationship evolved after 1994, and Germans are in love still with Nelson Mandela. A symbol of reconciliation, which is something in their own history that they desperately wanted to achieve, and that reconciliation still lingers. So there's an appetite for a relationship between the two of us, and I think, Stephen, considering which other gateway into Africa would you consider to be important? The Nigerians, the Egyptians, the Kenyans, the Ethiopians, all come with challenges, and so I'm quite sure, and it makes a lot of sense to me to think that the Germans are nurturing this relationship with South Africa, particularly under business-oriented Cyril Ramaphosa administration, to make sure that they keep the market and expand it and use South Africa as a base. By the way, of course, the Germans, like many others, were very, very greatly disturbed or deeply disturbed by the July unrest, a failed insurrection, whatever you want to call it. And I think some of us were holding our breaths. If German business interests begin to disinvest or step back, it'll impact heavily on our trade relations and our employment rates, and the tax base. So I think for all of these reasons, it behoves our diplomats in Durban to make sure that they learn a few words of German.
I mean, obviously, do you think Germany itself is going to change that much? I mean, if we look at Germany, it's fascinating to watch them try and form a coalition. They're a bit worried that this will be a three-party coalition, probably. It's a much more homogenous society than ours. Ours has sort of very different groups and much more inequality than theirs. They're worried about that. We, of course, have local government elections where, we have some municipalities with 4 or even more parties trying to form a coalition. It shows you how difficult governance can be, even in a country, I'm going to say it, like Germany.
Of course, that when we negotiated through CODESA, the new constitution and the political system, the voting system, etc., Germany played an important role. The ANC was invited to Germany to study this coalition business, but also other countries, Switzerland, the Dutch, and so on. And the Germans made sure that they influenced, or that they extended their influence in terms of democracy or nation or state building. And that was an enduring contribution, I would say. I'm watching with fascination, as I think many others do, how this coalition formation is now going to happen in Germany. So you've got the SPD, who's 1% ahead of Angela Merkel's more conservative Christian Democrats. They need to choose 2 others. The Greens come to mind, and then there's a liberal, sort of a DA type political party, a smaller one. And that coalition, I think, is in the making, the way I read the signs. But it also means that some compromises will have to be struck. And it seems to me that the only ideological issue really in Germany now is this question of climate change. They were quite shocked a couple of weeks ago when in their summer they had some very severe floods. Remember, Angela Merkel had to rush over and stand by to watch how the rescue effort took place. And by the way, she will continue to be the Chancellor until such time that Olaf Scholz can sign the new coalition agreement. But this thing of climate change, extreme weather, and how the German economy must adapt to clean energy is a big thing. And again, if you think it through, whatever successes they achieve politically but also technologically might impact on us. I think if we are smart, we will sit back and watch this, and at the right time go back to Germany, ask them, tell us the lessons about coalition formation and about changing your economy to a cleaner form.
Professor, I really appreciate the time. Thank you. Professor Anthoni Van Nieuwkerk, Professor of Security Studies at the Wits School of Governance.